She stepped into the city's most luxurious hotel, out of place and unnoticed by all but one. But in the blink of an eye, the woman who seemed invisible would soon hold everyone's attention, for all the wrong reasons. The simple woman stepped hesitantly into the grand hotel lobby, her worn shoes clicking softly on the marble floor. The chandeliers above sparkled, casting reflections that highlighted the stark contrast between her modest clothing and the lavish surroundings. She stood out, but not in a way that made her feel welcome. The staff, busy with their own duties, cast quick, judgmental glances in her direction. Some whispered among themselves, others simply looked away. The hotel manager, well-groomed and dressed in an immaculate suit, noticed her immediately. His smile was practiced, but there was a coldness in his eyes. He walked toward her briskly, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the floor, cutting through the silence. His voice, initially soft, carried an air of forced politeness as he asked, "Can I help you, madam?" His gaze scanned her, sizing her up with a judgment that was barely concealed. "I'm here to meet someone," she replied, her voice shaky but firm, as if trying to assert her right to be there. The manager raised an eyebrow, dismissing her with a glance. "A meeting, you say?" His tone changed, dripping with thinly veiled skepticism. "Perhaps you're lost, or looking for something more suitable?" His words were sharp, each one designed to push her out of the way, to make her feel small, as though she didn't belong. Before she could respond, he gestured toward the door with a wave, his voice louder now. "This is a private establishment. It's not for people like you." His words echoed, drawing the attention of a few nearby guests who shifted uncomfortably. The woman's face flushed, but she stood her ground. "I really do have someone to meet," she repeated, her voice quieter now, the embarrassment starting to creep in. But the manager's patience had worn thin. He raised his hand, signaling to the nearby security guards. "Please escort her out," he ordered sharply. His command left no room for negotiation. With a deep, silent sigh, the woman's face crumpled. She wanted to protest, to scream at the unfairness of it all, but instead, she lowered her head and walked toward the exit. Her steps were slow, heavy, each one filled with quiet humiliation. The hotel, with all its wealth and splendor, felt more like a prison to her now. She exited the lobby, her heart sinking deeper with each step, leaving behind the world she had never asked to be a part of, but had still been cruelly excluded from. Just moments after the woman exited the lobby, a sleek black luxury car pulled up outside the hotel. The engine hummed to a stop, and the sound of the car doors opening echoed through the quieting lobby. A tall, well-dressed man stepped out, his presence commanding immediate attention. His tailored suit, polished shoes, and air of authority made it clear this was no ordinary guest. The doormen rushed to open the doors, their movements swift and respectful, as if they were expecting him. The hotel manager quickly put on a broad, practiced smile and stepped forward, eager to greet this important guest. "Welcome, sir," he said, his voice smooth and polite. But the man didn't return the smile. Instead, he strode past the manager without a word, his eyes scanning the lobby with intent. The manager faltered for a moment, thrown off by the man's cold demeanor, but quickly recovered. "Can I help you, sir?" the manager asked, still grinning but with a hint of unease in his voice. The man didn't answer right away, continuing to look around until he finally stopped and turned toward the manager. His voice was low but sharp as he asked, "Where is my wife?" The manager's heart skipped a beat. "Your wife, sir?" he stammered, confused, his smile faltering slightly. The words didn't seem to fit the image of the man before him, someone so refined, so rich. The manager looked around, unsure of what to do. Without a word, the man pulled out his phone and opened a photo. He held the screen out for the manager to see. It was a picture of the same woman who had just been unceremoniously tossed out. The manager's stomach sank as the realization hit him like a punch. He stared at the image, the blood draining from his face as the weight of his mistake became painfully clear. Around him, the guests and staff had begun to take notice. Whispers rippled through the room, eyes turning toward the manager as the realization spread. Panic surged through him, his mind racing for an explanation, but all that came out was a weak attempt at an apology. I can explain, sir." But the man's expression remained cold, unyielding. His eyes were hard as stone, and his silence spoke volumes. The manager's words seemed to fall flat, his once confident facade cracking under the weight of his error. The lobby, once bustling with activity, now felt suffocating as the tension in the air thickened. The man's voice, cold and measured, cut through the tension in the air. "What happened?" he demanded, his gaze never leaving the manager. The manager, now visibly sweating, fumbled for words. His mind raced, trying to piece together a convincing excuse, but his words came out in a rush. It's a misunderstanding, sir. I thought she didn't belong here." His voice trembled slightly, betraying his panic. The husband's face remained stone cold, his jaw tightening as he processed the manager's words. Then, without warning, he stepped forward, his voice sharp and accusing. "You threw her out, didn't you?" The manager's eyes darted around the room, his confidence slipping away as the crowd grew silent. He stammered, I didn't mean to. She just didn't. She didn't look like she was supposed to be here." But the husband cut him off, his voice rising in anger. "You judged her by her clothes? By her silence?" The question hung in the air as guests and staff began to look at the manager with growing disdain. The weight of the husband's words was like a slap, and the manager's attempts to explain sounded hollow against the sharp edge of his accusation. The husband's voice grew louder, his frustration spilling over. "This is the kind of hospitality your hotel is known for?" The words struck like a public reprimand, echoing through the room. The guests, now fully aware of the situation, watched in stunned silence as the manager's pride crumbled. His usual air of confidence was gone, replaced by nervousness and guilt. The manager, desperate to salvage the situation, bowed his head slightly, his voice shaking. "Please, sir, I beg your pardon. Let me make it right. I can fix this." He was now pleading, his facade shattered, but the husband wasn't listening. Without a word, the husband turned and snapped his fingers toward the security team. "Bring her back, now," he ordered. Moments later, the woman was escorted back into the lobby. Her steps were slow, each one heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. She walked with dignity, but the hurt was visible in the slump of her shoulders. As she reached the center of the room, the husband stepped forward, taking her hand gently in his. He turned to face the now silent crowd, his voice calm but resolute. "This woman," he said, his gaze sweeping over the staff and guests, "is the reason I am who I am, and you humiliated her." His words rang out, a powerful declaration that left no room for doubt. The manager stood frozen, his face pale, as the truth of his actions hung in the air. The husband's voice broke through the silence, firm and commanding. "I own shares in this hotel chain," he announced, his words sending a ripple of surprise through the room. The manager blinked, his eyes widening as the weight of the revelation hit him. "I'm an investor in the parent company," the husband continued, his gaze steady and unyielding. "I believed this place stood for class, for dignity, not for cruelty." The manager's heart sank. He knew what was coming next, but he couldn't stop the flood of panic that gripped him. The husband's next words were as sharp as daggers. "I demand an official apology. If I don't get one, I will pull my investment. Or worse, I will go public with this. You can imagine the consequences." The manager's face drained of color. He took a step forward, his voice trembling with desperation. "Please, sir, I'm so sorry. This was a mistake, a horrible mistake. I'll make it right. I promise. We'll retrain all the staff, and I'll personally ensure that this never happens again." His hands were shaking, his pride now completely gone, as he begged for forgiveness. But before the husband could respond, the woman, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. "I didn't need red carpets," she said, her eyes meeting the manager's for the first time. "I just needed basic respect." The simplicity of her words stung with truth, and the manager flinched, his face reddening with shame. The husband turned to her, his expression softening as he placed a gentle hand on her arm. "You'll never walk into any room alone again," he said softly, his voice full of tenderness. "Not while I'm here." The woman nodded, her eyes welling up with unshed tears, but there was a flicker of relief in them too. Together, they turned to leave. As they walked toward the door, heads held high, the lobby seemed to hold its breath. The manager stood frozen, a broken man, watching them leave. The staff whispered among themselves, the shame of what had just happened hanging in the air. The final shot lingered on the hotel sign, which flickered faintly, as if reflecting the tarnished pride of the establishment. The once proud symbol of luxury now stood as a quiet reminder of the prejudice that could stain even the most polished of facades.